Fear rarely announces itself loudly. Most of the time, it moves quietly in the background of our lives. It whispers before we speak our minds. It hesitates when we consider taking a risk. It subtly shapes our decisions, our relationships, and even our ambitions. You might not even notice how often fear influences you. The job you didn't apply for because you weren't sure you were good enough. The opinion you didn't express because you didn't want to be judged. The opportunity you let pass because the outcome felt uncertain. We tend to imagine fearless people as rare individuals, warriors, leaders, adventurers, people who somehow possess a personality that allows them to move through life without hesitation. But the Stoic philosophers saw something very different. They believed fearlessness was not a personality trait at all. It was a way of thinking. And more importantly, it was something that could be trained. According to the Stoics, most of the fears that control human behavior are not rooted in reality. They are rooted in perception, stories we tell ourselves about what might happen. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus once observed that people are not disturbed by events themselves, but by the opinions they form about those events. In other words, it is not the situation that creates fear, it is the interpretation. A critical comment becomes humiliation. A potential failure becomes a catastrophe. A moment of uncertainty becomes a threat. And slowly, without realizing it, we begin living cautiously, protecting ourselves not from real danger, but from imagined outcomes. In modern life, this pattern is everywhere. People fear judgment on social media. They fear making mistakes in their careers. They fear rejection in relationships. They fear appearing foolish in front of others. But the Stoics lived in a world far harsher than our own. They faced exile, political persecution, betrayal, war, and death. Yet many of them remained remarkably calm. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire under constant pressure. Seneca navigated the dangerous politics of ancient Rome. Epictetus lived part of his life as a slave. And still, their writings reveal something extraordinary, a deep sense of inner stability. Their fearlessness did not come from controlling the world around them. It came from mastering the world within them. They developed mental principles, ways of thinking that prevented fear from dominating their decisions. These principles still apply today, and when practiced consistently, they begin to reshape the way a person sees uncertainty, difficulty, and even failure itself. It begins with a realization that lies at the heart of Stoic philosophy. Much of what we fear simply isn't ours to control. Most anxiety comes from trying to manage things that were never within our power to begin with. We worry about what other people think. We worry about whether our efforts will succeed. We worry about outcomes that depend on countless variables beyond our influence. But the Stoics made a simple yet profound distinction. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Our actions, our choices, our values, these belong to us. But outcomes, opinions, reputation, and chance do not. Fear arises when we confuse the two. Consider how many people hesitate to pursue something meaningful.
Then the outcome should not determine whether you act. Epictetus reminded his students that peace comes from focusing only on what belongs to us, our intentions, and our efforts. Fearless people do not eliminate uncertainty. They simply stop demanding certainty from life. And once this shift happens, something surprising occurs. Many fears begin to lose their grip. But there is another source of fear that people rarely consider: the belief that life should be easy. Many of us grow up assuming that if we make the right decisions, work hard, and behave responsibly, life should unfold smoothly. So when difficulties appear, when plans fail, when rejection happens, when unexpected obstacles arise, it feels unfair. It feels like something has gone wrong. But the Stoics saw hardship very differently. They expected it. In fact, they practiced a mental exercise known as premeditatio malorum, which means the premeditation of difficulties. Rather than hoping nothing would go wrong, they regularly imagined challenges ahead of time, not to become pessimistic, but to become prepared. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his personal journal that each morning he reminded himself he would encounter difficult people, misunderstandings, and obstacles throughout the day, because when the mind expects difficulty, it is no longer shocked by it.
Imagine two people losing a job unexpectedly. One person believes life should always go according to plan. The loss feels devastating, almost personal. The other understands that uncertainty is a natural part of existence. The situation may still be difficult, but it does not destroy their sense of stability. Preparation removes the element of surprise, and when hardship becomes something expected rather than feared, the mind grows stronger. Another powerful source of fear lies in something even more subtle: our desire for approval. Human beings naturally want acceptance. We want to feel respected, valued, and understood. But when our sense of worth becomes dependent on the opinions of others, fear quietly takes control. Because the moment our emotional stability depends on someone else's approval, we become vulnerable to their judgment. This is especially visible in modern culture. People measure their worth through social validation, likes, comments, recognition, praise. They hesitate to express unpopular ideas. They avoid creative risks. They follow paths that feel safe rather than meaningful, all because of the possibility that someone might disapprove. The Stoics warned about this long before social media existed. Epictetus taught that if you want to be free, you must stop placing your happiness in the hands of others, because other people's opinions do not belong to you. They belong to them. Imagine someone who wants to pursue an unconventional career or creative passion. Friends might doubt them. Family might question their choices. Strangers might criticize. If that person requires approval before acting, they will remain stuck forever.
But if they ground their identity in their own principles rather than public opinion, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to fade. Self-respect replaces external validation, and decisions become guided by values instead of popularity. Of course, developing that kind of inner stability does not happen automatically. It requires training. Many people assume mental strength will appear naturally when life becomes difficult, but the mind doesn't suddenly become disciplined in moments of stress. It falls back on habits. This is why the Stoics practiced daily mental training. Marcus Aurelius wrote his famous Meditations not as a book for others, but as a private exercise to remind himself how to think clearly. He questioned his assumptions. He examined his reactions. He reflected on his fears. In modern life, the same principle applies. Someone who never reflects on their thoughts may find themselves overwhelmed during conflict, criticism, or uncertainty. But a person who regularly examines their thinking develops psychological resilience. They learn to pause before reacting. They learn to challenge irrational fears. They learn to guide their mind rather than be controlled by it. Fearlessness in this sense is not something dramatic. It is built through small daily habits of awareness. But perhaps the most powerful Stoic idea for overcoming fear comes from a place most people avoid entirely: the awareness of mortality.
Modern culture tends to treat death as something distant and uncomfortable, something to ignore. But the Stoics practiced something called memento mori, remember that you will die, not as a morbid obsession, but as a source of clarity. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself that life is temporary, and when viewed from that perspective, many fears suddenly seem trivial. Imagine someone who dreams of writing a book, starting a business, or pursuing a meaningful project. Yet they hesitate for years because they fear embarrassment or failure. Now imagine that same person fully accepting the reality that life is limited, that time will eventually run out. Suddenly, the fear of looking foolish becomes insignificant compared to the regret of never trying. Awareness of mortality removes illusions. It reveals what truly matters. It encourages bold action instead of endless hesitation. And with this perspective, something else begins to change. Obstacles themselves begin to look different. Most people see obstacles as signs they're on the wrong path. A setback appears, and they assume they should stop. But the Stoics believed obstacles were not interruptions to life. They were part of life's training. Marcus Aurelius wrote a simple but powerful line: "The obstacle is the way."
Opportunity to strengthen character. Patience grows through delays. Resilience grows through setbacks. Wisdom grows through mistakes. Think of someone facing repeated rejection while pursuing a goal. Each rejection could be interpreted as evidence that success is impossible, or it could be interpreted as training, an exercise in persistence. The Stoic mindset transforms difficulty into preparation. Fear decreases because challenges are no longer seen as threats. They are seen as teachers. And when someone truly understands this, they become far more willing to act, because failure itself loses its power. This leads to another important realization. Many fears are created by our attachment to specific outcomes. We want the promotion. We want the project to succeed. We want the relationship to work exactly as we imagine. And when we become emotionally dependent on those outcomes, anxiety follows. Because outcomes are unpredictable. They depend on timing, circumstances, and other people. The Stoics offered a different approach. Focus on the effort, release the outcome. Imagine preparing for an important opportunity, a job interview, a creative launch, or a major decision. Fear appears when the mind insists that success must happen. But when attention shifts to the quality of effort, something changes.
You prepare carefully. You act with integrity. You do the best you can. And then you allow the outcome to unfold naturally. This mindset removes enormous pressure. It allows action without paralysis, because success is no longer defined by results beyond your control. It is defined by whether you acted according to your values. And when someone consistently lives this way, fear gradually loses its authority. They become calmer, more decisive, more resilient, not because life becomes easier, but because their relationship with uncertainty has changed. In the end, Stoic fearlessness is not about becoming aggressive or reckless. It is about becoming clear about what you control, clear about what truly matters, clear about the fact that life will include difficulty, uncertainty, and change. And once these truths are accepted, the mind stops fighting reality. It begins working with it. The Stoics themselves were not immune to hardship. They faced loss, exile, political danger, and personal suffering. But they trained their minds so that fear never dictated their choices.
Their courage was quiet. It appeared in simple decisions, speaking honestly, acting with integrity, continuing forward despite uncertainty. That kind of courage is available to anyone willing to train their thinking. So consider this question for a moment. Which of these principles would change your life the most if you practiced it consistently? Would it be focusing only on what you control? Expecting hardship instead of fearing it? Letting go of the need for approval? Or remembering how limited time truly is? Stoicism is not meant to remain an interesting idea. It is meant to be practiced. And when practiced, even small shifts in thinking can create extraordinary inner strength. If this perspective resonated with you, consider sharing this video with someone who might benefit from these ideas. And if you want to explore more timeless lessons from Stoic philosophy, subscribe to the channel for future videos. Because sometimes the most powerful wisdom is also the oldest, and learning to master the mind may be the greatest form of freedom a person can achieve.